Good morning. I think we're going to try to get started here. I'd like to thank all of you for attending this morning's press conference with six outstanding U.S. mayors from our constituency in North America. Exactly a year after the Paris Agreement, 90 world cities have come here today in Mexico City in a spirit of climate leadership and global collaboration. C40's U.S. cities are some of our most active members and play a vital role in C40. In fact, 1 in 5 U.S. citizens live in C40 cities. And the mayors here today represent a vital constituency in the U.S. This is why I'm delighted to release today a special study drawing from the bigger Deadline 2020 report that we launched yesterday that makes clear the pivotal role that U.S. cities will play in delivering a climate-safe future. The study shows that U.S. cities have been true leaders on climate action. Over a 10-year period, the 12 U.S. cities have taken nearly 2,400 individual actions to respond to climate change. And U.S. cities are the most collaborative of any region globally within the C40 network. In fact, 37% of the actions that they have taken have been carried out through networking, often with cities abroad. U.S. cities are also committed to continued leadership. Collectively, our 12 U.S. cities plan to expand 91% of what they're currently doing. And the impact that all U.S. cities can make globally is tremendous. If all U.S. cities follow the lead of our U.S. C40 cities and pursue deep, rapid emission reductions, cities would contribute more than 1/3 of the emissions reductions needed to meet the United States' commitment to the Paris Agreement. In fact, by 2100, the end of the century, the cumulative pollution reductions from U.S. cities would represent 6% of global savings needed to keep our planet within 1.5 degrees of warming. So, on behalf of C40, I want to thank our U.S. mayors for their leadership, and I'd like to introduce Mayor Bowser to lead this session. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. Hola, buenos dias. I'm Muriel Bowser. I am the mayor of Washington, D.C. We are, of course, our nation's capital in a city, county, state all at once. We have about 670,000 residents, awesome neighborhoods, and a thriving economy. We are very enthusiastic members of C40 and recognize the things that we will do as mayors can make a huge difference. I think what you will hear from all of the mayors and what you've probably heard all week is that as mayors, we cannot and do not, and our residents would not tolerate us not making decisions, not investing in innovation, and not looking for ways to make our cities more resilient. The mayor's office is kind of where the rubber hits the road, if you will, and making sure that we serve residents, our current residents, and prepare our cities for generations to come. So I am delighted to be here with my fellow mayors who are going to share with you what their cities are doing to fight climate change. Let me introduce them, and then we will turn to them for some remarks. And as we like to say in Washington, D.C., my friend Ed Murray from the other Washington, Seattle, Washington, is with us, as well as Greg Stanton, who is the mayor of Phoenix, Arizona, and Charlie Hales, who is the mayor of Portland, Oregon, and Steve Adler, who is the mayor of Austin, Texas. We're also joined by Anthony Shorris, who is the first deputy mayor of the city of New York. So with that, let's turn to our friend, Mayor Murray.
Well, good morning, and Mayor, thank you very much, and it is always good to be with the other Washington. Seattle has long been a leader on the environment, and in recent years, we've seen a tremendous growth of our city's population and of our employment sector. Currently in downtown, the core of Seattle, there are 65 buildings under construction. There'll be 8,000 new residential units that come online in the next 18 months and a 30% increase in hotel rooms in the next 18 months. But despite that growth, which has been significant for our city, our carbon pollution is actually declining. So we have found a way to reduce our footprint as we continue to grow and as our economy continues to grow. Those things don't have to be in conflict with each other. We are, and we developed the first carbon-neutral electric utility, and I believe still the only one. We're investing in electrifying our municipal fleet, which has had 1 million miles of pure electricity in the travel so far. And we are benchmarking our buildings and how we can make them more energy efficient. We also understand, given the current political situation in our own country, that we as a city, that Seattle's committed with our other cities in the United States to continuing to be part of the global community. We will continue to work with cities around the world on this very important issue. We're not going to step back. Growth, population, and jobs happen in American cities. Our ability to continue to be a strong partner with the rest of the world is one that we won't back away from. And we're not naive about the political environment that we face going forward, but we actually believe that we can offer leadership. Finally, yesterday I signed an agreement with the mayor of Mexico City that the city of Seattle and the city of Mexico would work together on issues such as climate change, technology, and cultural exchanges. This is an important move on the part of Seattle and Mexico City at this point in our history. Others can talk about building walls, but we believe we can build bridges that can go over those walls.
That's right.
And it is an honor to be here this morning. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mayor. And I think one thing that we'll hear from a number of the mayors at the panel is how our cities are changing so rapidly, that we have rapid population growth as we do in Washington, D.C. We have a net gain presently of about 1,000 people moving to Washington, D.C. a month. So when we talk about fighting climate change, we're talking about serving the residents that we have, but also getting our cities ready for pretty dramatic growth. And I think that's also the case in Austin, Texas, which a lot of us like to go to Austin to focus on innovation and a big conference that you host, Mayor, and we're looking forward to hearing what you're doing about climate change.
Well, first, let me say it's an honor to be on this panel with the other mayors. One thing that we learned in Paris a year ago was that over half of the international goal with respect to carbon reduction will be met at the subnational and at the city level. So you really do need to look to the cities to see where a lot of the work is going to be done, and these are great leaders on this panel, and we're trying to do our fair share in Austin as well. There are a lot of people moving to Austin. At this point, we have about 150 moving there a day. Net number with some leaving, it's over 100, and we're predicted to double in population over the next 24 years before we get to 2040. So we're dealing with a lot of challenges as we grow, but we have certain responsibilities that we believe as a community that we need to meet. These responsibilities are in reaction to what we're seeing in Austin with respect to climate change. We're seeing higher temperatures. The weather in Austin will be characterized as extended periods of drought interrupted by torrential rain. We're one of the most flood-prone areas in the country. We're seeing increased wildfires. We have a 100-year storm that's unusual. It's only supposed to come once every 100 years, and we've had 3 of those in the last 5 years in Austin, Texas, and we've had people that have died. To that end, our city has set the goal of reaching net zero community-wide greenhouse emissions by the year 2050 in Austin, Texas. To achieve that, we are reducing 900 megawatts of peak electricity by the year 2025. We've set a goal to get to 55% of our total generation being renewables by 2025. We are already passing 40% with the purchases that we just authorized last year, about 450 megawatts of solar, which with that purchase more than doubled the entire solar purchase in the entire state of Texas as it existed at that time. We're moving toward electric vehicles and electrification of our fleets. We're trying to reduce single occupancy car trips by 20% by the year 2020. And what we've learned is, as bad as the traffic is in Austin, and it is really bad, congestion is tough, but if we can reduce trips by 20%, we will have free flow traffic during peak hours at our most congested highways. And then I would just reaffirm that with an economy that we are blessed to have in Austin, Texas, that is on fire, we have a good economy because of our climate change values, because of the kinds of things that we're doing, and not in spite of those things.
Thank you, Mayor. Now I'd like to turn to Greg Stanton, who is the mayor of Phoenix, Arizona, to tell us what's going on in Phoenix.
Thank you very much, Mayor Bauer, for your leadership. It's an honor to be here at C40 in Mexico City. It's an honor to be on this stage with these other great American mayors. It heartened me earlier during the introduction to find out we're the most collaborative group of mayors in the world, particularly on the issue of climate change, but we're collaborative on everything. I love working with these other great mayors to build a competitive American economy, one rooted in innovation, building exports, and of course working together on sustainability and fighting climate change, because we know that cities are where the action is. That's where the jobs are being created. That's where people are moving to. And when we are successful on fighting climate change, meeting the American commitments on the Paris Agreement, it's going to be because of the people on this stage today. So I love working these other great American mayors. The reality is that we are not going backwards on sustainability or fighting climate change. And this fight isn't about one leader, one person. This is about our kids and their kids. It's about future generations. That's why this group of great mayors is going to do right by future generations and enacting strong policies to fight climate change. I know there's a lot of trepidation, a lot of nervousness about the role of America moving forward on the issue of climate change. We're here to tell you that America's leadership in the world on climate change is not going to change. It may take a different face. It may be the faces you see up here, but we're going to maintain our global leadership on this critically important issue. Phoenix, Arizona is the 5th largest city in the United States by population. We're located in the Sonoran Desert. Extreme heat as a result of climate change is a tremendous issue. We are up above 100 degrees just 2 days before Halloween, if you can believe that. Water issues and making sure that we protect our most important resource, water, in terms of now a 14-year drought in our community is critically important, and we've done an incredible job. In fact, we've grown by over 30% just the last 20 years, but we actually use less water today than we did a decade ago. Not per capita, total water, a huge achievement of our community. We have the largest fleet of alternative fuel vehicles in the country, in fact, bigger than Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago combined, in part because we're a big, over 500 square mile city. So we've had incredible accomplishments in that regard. Just 2 days ago, we voted to change all of our street lights to LED, a similar policy that probably most of these great American mayors have done. In our case, that's 100,000 street lights will now be energy-saving LED street lights. We've adopted a strong zero waste policy. We're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by close to 90% just over the next few decades. So we're heading in the right direction. In fact, we're trying to take a leadership role in the circular economy. We'll be talking about that later in this conference, making sure that our landfills don't get filled up unnecessarily. We're bringing entrepreneurs. We're actually creating a incubator at our transfer station so the private sector could come in and teach us as a city government stuff that's being put in the landfill, how that can be taken out of the landfill and actually make money, create an economy out of that. We've got some wonderful, great examples in that regard as well. I'd be remiss to mention, because I know a lot of people are concerned about the recent election and what it means for climate change. Led by our friend Mayor Garcetti and Mayor of New York and Chicago and other 37 mayors, leading mayors, I think all of the ones on this stage, sent a letter to the President-elect's transition team saying, don't go backwards on the Paris Agreement, keep moving this country forward. But if they do go backwards, this group, these leading mayors are committed to make sure that our cities and our country move forward in the right direction. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for bringing us that update. And I'm reminded as I look at some of the reports that we're talking about, that just for U.S. cities who are signed on to C40, there are over 1,600 actions that we need to take by 2020. Some of us are already doing many of those things. In some cases, we're going to have to double down on those actions so that we will be able to get there. But what's been important to us, and I think the reason why I wanted to make a point to be here was just what Mayor Stanton said. It is important that we all recognize that a single election doesn't change who we are in cities in America, and that has been the message that I have shared with all Washingtonians. We are who we are, and our values didn't change on Election Day. And the people of Washington, D.C., for example, have been very committed to making sure that we're making our city resilient and doing it through ways that not only are good for the environment, but it's good for our bottom line too, and that's always good when we can enter into an energy agreement that will have our public buildings over the next 20 years energized by renewables, by wind energy, and it's going to save us over $45 million. That is something that every mayor wants to be able to talk to taxpayers about. We're also going to double down on our commitment to solar, and that's important as well. But when I talk to my Director of Energy and the Environment, who is here, Tommy Wells, who many of you have met, anytime we're talking about how we're using renewables for our buildings, or certainly out among our residential community, I'm always asking too, are we making these money-saving opportunities available for everybody? And so that's another thing that we have to confront as cities, that when we're looking at these solutions, that we're spreading them across our cities, and we're making sure that our residents of every means can look to savings as well. So let me now turn to my friend from Portland, Charlie Hales.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser. So what I think you're seeing here, and which I think is obvious, is a culture of collaboration, which is enjoyed among U.S. mayors and among C40 mayors, in which we're engaged in a virtuous competition, which is friendly, but in which theft is authorized and appreciated. It's good to steal good ideas from each other, because the things that we try out for the benefit of our own citizens then become best practices in other cities and benefit citizens all over the world. And this culture is now well established among us as U.S. mayors and among the C40, the growing cohort of C40 mayors. Portland has been an innovator for quite a while in climate action. I'm very proud of that. I joined the Portland City Council in 1993, and a few months after I joined, we passed the United States' first local climate action plan. We just were recognized, and I'm so proud that we were last night, by the C40 group for having made that plan even better last year. It's now in its 4th generation. Under that plan, Portland has actually reduced its carbon footprint by 21%, 40% per capita, because like these other cities, we're growing. So we've actually reduced our carbon footprint while we have been expanding our economy and welcoming now about 1,000 people a month to Portland as well. We're continuing, hearing a message here that we're in this work together, and we are continuing, and we're also now accelerating because we must. C40 has shown us clearly that the pace of local action has to increase, not simply be maintained. So I'm proud to say that in Portland, over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be moving forward on 3 new action items. 1, an electric vehicle strategy. 2, requiring home energy scores, like the stickers on cars for miles per gallon, or liters per gallon. And 3rd, a new policy made permanent in our local law that we will have no fossil fuel export facilities in our city. No coal terminals, no oil terminals, no gas terminals. So we're going to continue accelerating that kind of public policy in Portland. And we all do this work in part because our people demand it. One of the most profound experiences for me as mayor has been having students from middle schools and high schools in my city with passionate concern for their futures, sitting at the witness table in our city council chambers, pleading with their leaders to be bold and visionary and think about the future of those young people. And I'll tell you, as a father and as a leader of my city, those pleas are irresistible. And I think they should be irresistible because they're right. And they want us to lead on their behalf. And that's why you hear a lot of passion for this work among us as mayors and among the C40, the group that are here. The other, I think, key note that you hear across all of us is that in a time in which talent and money are mobile, and and can move around the world almost effortlessly, at least in the case of money. People are voting with their feet and living in places that represent their values and that enjoy a very high quality of life. So the investments and policies that we are pursuing for climate change make our cities more attractive places to live. Frankly, that attractiveness brings other problems, but we would all rather manage the problems of growth, particularly sustainable growth, than we would of decay or decline. So it is both a responsible environmental policy and a smart economic policy to pursue this goal of climate action at the local level, because our citizens live in a better place and the world becomes better as a result.
That's right, and I like the way you put that, Mayor. We would rather manage the challenges of growth than those of decline, and that is certainly what we're facing, and having so many people and businesses move to our city and live in places and work in places where they never had before, which makes us all focus on transportation and how we're moving people around our cities. And for us, public transportation is important. We're a compact city of just 68 square miles. We're not growing any new roads in Washington, D.C. So how we innovate around public transportation is important. We have been very proud to have a pretty expansive bike share program in Washington, D.C. And now when I go to other cities, I'm always comparing our bike share program. And New York City has launched a pretty impressive one as mayor. So let us now turn to the first Deputy Mayor, Anthony Shorris of New York City.
Well, thank you, Mayor Bowser, and it is a great honor to be up here among all the actual elected officials, which I am not one, but I'll represent the bureaucrats that serve them all. So the American writer Mark Halperin wrote a few years ago that cities are both symbols and products of imagination. And imagination is the force that ensures justice and historical momentum in an imperfect world. Without imagination, we would not challenge certainty or be able to rise above ourselves. The Paris Agreement was the beginning of imagining a new world and challenging certainties of climate change and global destruction that were facing us. The C40 meetings, like today, are about making that happen and realizing the vision and that imagination. For New York, and Mayor Bill de Blasio, from the beginning of his term, laid out his agenda in the One NYC plan that described many of the elements that we've talked about and you've heard the other mayors talk about here today. An 80% reduction in greenhouse gases, a zero waste plan, a $20 billion program to adapt the city to climate change as it moves forward. That's in turn translated into thousands of retrofit actions, thousands and thousands of infrastructure projects, $500 million in city building retrofits, and a substantial reduction in our greenhouse gases. Many of us, as you've heard, share the same goals. We may frame them slightly differently, but one of the great joys of C40 is that it is a chorus of voices, all with slightly different tunes, all singing in harmony. We sing the same song, these American cities, and you saw that in the letter that I think is now even up to 42 signatories, bipartisan letter to the President-elect, demonstrating our continued commitment to the cause we're talking about here today. The shock of last month, the political shock of last month, means that many American cities will be on our own again in our fight for equity and inclusive growth. We will not let this latest twist in our own political system deter us. We have been alone before, and America has a long history of a powerful amount of its energy and power being demonstrated at the local level, and this will continue to test that commitment to local implementation and authority. Many of these actions you've heard taken were locally driven, locally implemented, and will change the face of much of America. The power of our imaginations, the will of our people, allows us to challenge certainties that are too easily otherwise accepted. New York City is proud to be among those 42 cities. We're proud to be among the 12 US C40 cities. We're proud to be here today sharing, learning, stealing, whatever we can to advance the common cause that we all share. Thanks.
Thank you, First Deputy Mayor. So I think we'll have some time for a few questions, but I'll just start with asking the mayors how the business community has come along with the initiatives that you have introduced around fighting climate change.
Well, I can throw a piece of that in. Thanks to C40, we just received some excellent collaborative help from the C40 organization researching the economic impact of green jobs and green policies in our city. And this was very timely because we were having this debate about fossil fuel exports in our city. Turned out there were 280 jobs in our city associated with moving fossil fuels around in ships and barges. And thanks to C40's research, we learned that there are 46,900 jobs involved in the export of green practices and green services to the world, and $10.2 billion of economic impact to our region. So that data and analysis both informed public policy and reinforced the business leaders in our community that are doing that work and building those businesses. So we appreciated the collaboration with C40 to document that this isn't just some starry-eyed hope, that the economy is based now on talent and green innovation. We have the numbers, and that helps
Fantastic.
reinforce a collaborative approach with those in those businesses that are building our economy that way.
Well, thank you. That's excellent research to share. Any other thoughts on bringing the business community along with some of these initiatives?
We have similar kind of experience with clean energy alone in our city, 20,000 related jobs, several billion-dollar impact on the economy. We have a lot of businesses that come to Austin, and they just did a survey recently looking at the tech companies coming to Austin, so Apple and Facebook and Google, companies that a lot of cities are competing to have there. And when they look at and answer the question why those cities come to Austin, Texas, the reason is because the people that work for those companies, the people they want to attract to work, want to live in Austin, Texas. And the reason they want to live in Austin, Texas is because of the culture and the policies that we have, and of which the climate change response is an integral and representative part.
Got it. One thing that almost floored me yesterday, I was stopped by the leader in education in Washington, D.C. just the other day, and we have a pretty robust public charter school sector, and they're doing a lot of building and constructing all the time. And she stopped me in my tracks to say, we need to extend our lease because I have to be able to finance my solar panels. And she was thinking about her 2 campuses and the $25 million that she's spending on energy costs. And she committed then to be a leader among the charter community in DC that is financing and spending a lot on construction and focusing on solar. Thank you.
Mayor, I was just going to add, in our city, the voters of Phoenix just passed a major transportation initiative, $32 billion investment over 35 years. Who do you think is going to get most of the resources? The private sector, to build 60 more miles of light rail to significantly increase our bus system, dial-a-ride services for people who happen to have disabilities, the bicycle infrastructure that all of our cities are developing. I mean, thousands and thousands of jobs are going to be created because of that investment in public transportation infrastructure. With regard to our circular economy, we were throwing away tens of thousands of pounds of palm fronds. Palm trees are big in Phoenix, Arizona. We figured out that was a recyclable resource. A company that partnered with us is making $10 million a year by taking the palm fronds out of the system and not ending up in a lab. There are tons of jobs in this space, tons of new jobs that none of us are even thinking about right now. The business community gets it. They know that if they're going to build a so-called circular economy, they're going to have to change the way they do business with their vendors, require their vendors to do better than make products that are going to end up with plastics and things like that in the landfills. They intuitively get that. Their vendors are responding, and jobs are being created as a result. So I don't think there's much doubt in the debate that doing this right is going to stimulate the economy and create great new green jobs in America and across the globe.
You know, I would add, Mayor Stanton made a very important point. There was another story on Election Day. His city, Seattle Metropolitan Region, passed a $54 billion light rail package. So there's another story that happened, as I said, on Election Day. And business was a key part of that. In addition, we see our businesses like Amazon using their own resources, the incredible heat that's generated, capturing that in the center of the city, partnering with other businesses, and reutilizing that in a way that makes it much more energy efficient. So again, business is our partner.
I just might add to that, and I want to add the flip side of opportunity, which is threat. New York was taught a hard lesson a few years ago when Sandy came, as for other cities. And our business communities come to recognize that an enormous share of America's gross domestic product flows through New York City, in particular in communities that are directly affected by the dangers of climate change. So the $20 billion that New York's going to be investing in adaptive strategies to protect itself are strongly supported by the very businesses that are generating the American economy and that are profoundly threatened, as are many other cities, because cities are often in coastal communities, which both give them, again, great opportunity, but pose serious threat. Obviously, New Orleans more than anyone. But in New York, I think there's now a much broader recognition that if there's not change in how we behave and how we protect, not only is our domestic product an issue, America's could be as well.
Okay, yes, an audience question.
Good morning. I'm Gregory Scruggs. I'm a Seattle-based correspondent for Cityscope, a publication based out of Washington, D.C. So I don't know which is the other Washington.
It's perspective.
Indeed. And we cover trends in cities globally. We had the pleasure of speaking with Mayor Hales the day after the election, and so I'm looking forward to the chance to hear from the rest of our U.S. mayors here. Further on that issue, yesterday, Vancouver's mayor, Gregor Robertson, offered some reflections on what it was like to be a climate change leader when the national government is skeptical, if not hostile, under the conservative Harper administration in Canada. And he described the experience as dealing with, quote, punishment in the form of a lack of federal investment. I understand, of course, that all of you will be continuing your policies regardless of what the Trump administration does on climate change, whether it pulls out of the Paris Agreement, rolls back EPA regulations, et cetera. But how do you plan to compensate for the likely lack of federal investment you'll be receiving on many fronts, including those related to climate change? And since we are at C40, and as you've described, it's a culture of collaboration, what advice have you gotten from other cities around the world as you prepare to deal with this new political climate?
Can I put this in a little bit of perspective? When I look at Seattle's budget, which is about $5 billion, $85 million a year is federal money. It's in different programs. That's no small number, but in the larger budget, the federal government has been receding as support for cities for decades. When you look at the package, I just mentioned $54 billion of local money taxed. It's predicated on another 9% from the federal government. So again, I think we don't want to lose that money. But the challenge for us hasn't been a fear of losing it. The challenge for us, and it doesn't change with this election, is a need for the federal government to step back in like they did 35 years ago.
And I would add, as my friend said, opportunity and risk are the flip sides of a coin. And so we also have an opportunity to think of the chance to think about what opportunities a new administration will bring. And so go with me for a minute. So we're all analyzing. Nobody expected what happened. I mean, I guess some people did. I don't think anybody actually did expect what happened. But I have directed my staff, all of my agency directors, for example, to analyze risk and opportunities with the incoming administration. But we have somebody saying that he wants to find a way to spend $1 trillion in infrastructure. Now, I don't know a mayor up here that doesn't think that sounds good, because we have crumbling roads, bridges, airports, public transportation, sidewalks, street lights, you name it, it's crumbling. And so folks interested in fighting back the climate change like we are need to look at ways that some of that $1 trillion can be used in sustainable ways. What type of materials are we going to use? And we're talking about millions and millions of dollars worth of projects involving concrete, for example. How can we leverage and use and find out different ways to finance these projects? I think they're going to be very interested in financing mechanisms to get these projects done. And that's also important. And let's think about who we're talking about, somebody that likes big league projects. Let's come up with some. Challenge them to say, you want to spend $1 trillion. I have these projects teed up in my city, and I want them done in a sustainable way. We have some ideas, but we think that with your commitment to this $1 trillion worth of spending, that we may get some more interesting financing vehicles, but we have to push down and press hard on making sure we're using sustainable materials and techniques. And I have some ideas for Washington, D.C.
I would just add on that look, this new reality of cities being more self-reliant, less resources flowing from Washington is likely going to accelerate, but it's something that we've been dealing with as leaders of major American city now for a long period of time. There's been gridlock in Washington at the federal level for years now where we haven't received nearly the support that we deserve or have had in the past. That's the new reality of city leadership for a long period of time. And I think all the mayors up here right now are bracing for the fact that the new administration probably will try to use the federal purse strings to implement the federal priorities. But we were elected to implement our community's priorities, which may be different than the new administration's priorities in Washington, D.C., whether it be on climate change, which is a critical priority for all of us, and we're gonna come up with the political will to get it done on the issue of climate change. They might try to use the federal purse strings to conscript our local police departments to engage in some mass deportation policies, et cetera, using the federal purse strings. I don't think any of us up here are gonna play that game. We're not gonna do that. It's not good public policy. It's not smart for the citizens of our community. So this will play out not just on the issue of climate change, but a variety of issues. And I think the leaders on this stage and major American city mayors are ready for that fight.
Okay, I think we have time for one more. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if you could thanks for sharing. I was wondering maybe if you could tell us in what sectors you are expecting any roadblocks. Are there particular initiatives that you think that you might struggle to get done, or maybe initiatives coming from Washington that might be imposed on your cities?
I'll go first again. It's not related to climate change, but I think the thing that concerns me most, cities in America are struggling with the issue of police and police reform. Seattle's one of the cities that's under a consent decree from the federal government. It would be a travesty for the federal government to step back from basically forcing cities to reform their police departments. I think that could have catastrophic implications for tensions, particularly tensions around race, at least in my city.
And I would add, just to echo a little bit what Mayor Stanton said, cities in American cities around the world are based essentially on three things: on immigration, on integration, and on the power of imagination that's released by those forces. Slowing down, damaging America's great history of immigration would be a tremendously damaging thing for many of our cities. We happen to have a statue in our harbor that would make it particularly awkward. So we are a city that always has been, and always will remain completely and deeply committed to immigration, social integration, and the unlocking of the imagination of those people, which is what has created the greatness that is New York and America.
Now, and you asked a question about roadblocks, and we've had a lot of discussion about the federal-city relationship moving forward and what that might look like. For some of us on the stage, myself included, I think Mayor Adler also, we have, especially on the issue of climate change, state legislatures, state governments that are not supportive of this agenda. And so in the city of Phoenix, we're going to push forward with a very aggressive agenda on climate change, And in many cases, with the state legislature, that's going to try to pass laws to preempt the city, my city, and cities like mine from enacting those. And so we're going to have a good Donnybrook, not just with, I think on occasion, the new administration in Washington, but in my case, in a city like Phoenix, in a so-called red state of Arizona, we're going to have some good fights with our state legislature over who gets to decide what city policy should be. And certainly, I believe that as mayor, I was elected to implement the will of the people, and the citizens of Phoenix should decide our public policy, not members of the state legislature. We often end up in court over these fights about whether or not the legislature can pass laws to stop the city of Phoenix from implementing aggressive and progressive climate change policies, as well as other important public policies. But to be honest, the real court is court of public opinion. It's my job as mayor is to build community support, community will, to get the public to understand how important it is that we be a leader on these issues. And when you win the court of public opinion, usually, but not always, you'll win those policy votes.
And I think, yes, go ahead, Mayor.
I'd add about public opinion. I have the luxury of governing in a state that I'm not fighting my state legislature, like my two colleagues here are, so my sympathies to them. But all of us deal with a diversity of political opinion in our country. Obviously, a deeply divided country, as this national election showed. But all of us have parts of our states that are philosophically different than our cities in many cases. But Oregon is similar. There are counties in Oregon that the majority of the voters voted for Donald Trump. And yet, a couple of years ago, a statewide survey in our state, done not for political reasons, but a research survey called the Oregon Values and Beliefs Study, found that well over 3/4 of Oregonians, statewide, agreed with the statement, climate change is real and we need to make changes in our society to respond to it. So the public opinion is not that different in cities on that issue. I believe public opinion nationally and even in the rural areas of our states is in a very strong majority in support of climate action. And so although we'll have ideological fights perhaps with Washington or our state capitals, the people are with us, not just the people inside the city limits.
All right. So let's appreciate the mayors for their thoughts, and thank you for being here. And thank you for listening. And so if there's one key takeaway is that American mayors are moving forward. We're going to continue to innovate and do what's best for our residents and our climate. Thank you.
Oh, of course. Sure.